We have to remember peace is not an absence of war or conflict, right? But peace is the ordering of our human nature according to the eternal law of God. So it's a matter of the heart, I think. Peace is a matter of the heart.
Hello and welcome. My name is Rachel, and you're listening to episode 208 of Candid Catholic Convos, a show about Catholicism that enriches your faith, answers your questions, and meets you wherever you're at on your faith journey. April is the month of the military child, and with so many military installations here in central Pennsylvania, chances are you know someone or are someone associated with the military in some way, shape, or form. Military kids are a unique breed. They're brave, resilient, adaptable, and tough, often before they even know how to spell any of those words. It's a reflection of the toughness they're brought up in, but sometimes that makes watching the news difficult. I mean, my kids often feel conflicted when it comes to their Catholic and military upbringing and current events around the globe. I know it's true for me, and I'm certain it's true for those who maybe aren't military adjacent. Conflict has a way of stirring up confusion in all of us, but Christ is constant. So how can we reconcile the two? Before we explore this further, let's read some scripture. Today's verse comes from John chapter 15, verse 13. Greater love has no one than this, to lay down one's life for one's friends. It's a short verse, a very familiar verse, but it carries incredible weight. Jesus isn't speaking hypothetically here. These words come during the Last Supper, just before his passion. He's not just defining love, he's about to live it. And that's what makes this kind of love so challenging. It's not about feelings or convenience. It's sacrificial. It costs something. Sometimes it costs everything. Most of us won't be asked to literally lay down our lives, but we are invited in that same kind of love in everyday ways. It might look like putting someone else's needs before our own, choosing patience when it's hard, forgiving when we'd rather hold on to hurt, or simply showing up for someone who's struggling. This kind of love doesn't always feel dramatic. In fact, it's often quiet and hidden, but that doesn't make it any less powerful. Jesus calls us friends in this passage, and that's easy to overlook. The God of the universe invites us into relationship, not just obedience. And then he shows us what that relationship looks like. Total self-gift. When we hear this verse, it's worth asking, where am I being invited to love more deeply? Where can I lay something down? My time, my comfort, my pride, for the sake of someone else? Because every act of self-giving love, no matter how small, participates in the love of Christ himself. And that's where transformation happens, not just for others, but within us. Today's Saint Spotlight shines on Venerable Emil Kapaun, a Kansas farm boy, Catholic priest, and U.S. Army chaplain whose life became a powerful witness to courage, sacrifice, and faith under fire. Born in 1916, Father Kapaun was ordained in 1940 and later felt called to serve soldiers as a military chaplain. During the Korean War, he didn't just minister from a distance. He lived alongside his troops, celebrating Mass on the battlefield, hearing confessions in foxholes, and risking his life to rescue wounded soldiers. There's even a famous photo of him, the last one of him ever taken, where he's celebrating Mass for a soldier on the hood of a battered Willys Jeep, wearing his priestly vestments and muddy combat boots. In 1950, during the Battle of Busan, Father Kapaun refused to abandon his men as enemy forces overran their position. He stayed behind, tending to the injured and comforting the dying, ultimately being captured and taken to a prisoner of war camp. Even in captivity, his priesthood didn't stop. He stole food to feed fellow prisoners, led secret prayers, and offered hope in the face of despair. His captors saw him as a threat, not because of violence, but because of the strength he gave others. Father Kapaun died in the camp in 1951, after months of suffering. But his legacy lived on in the lives of the men he served, many of whom credited him with saving not just their lives, but their souls. Across the country, Jeep masses are still occasionally celebrated to honor Father Kapaun and give thanks for his holy priesthood and sacrifice. In 1993, he was named Servant of God, and in 2021, he was declared Venerable, recognized for his heroic virtue. Venerable Emil Kapaun reminds us that sainthood isn't always found in quiet places. It can be forged in the most difficult circumstances, wherever love and sacrifice meet. For our marquee topic, today we're joined by Father John Bateman, pastor at St. Joe's Parish in Mechanicsburg and chaplain for the PA Air National Guard. Father Bateman also has a degree in Canon Law and is uniquely qualified to help us understand current events from all sides, as a civilian, as a soldier, and as a Catholic. Father Bateman, welcome back to Candid Catholic Convos. It's been a little while since
it has been a while, but I'm happy to be back. It's good to see you again.
So tell me about what has been going on in your life, especially when it comes to being a chaplain in the military and how that all kind of came about.
Great. Well, a lot's certainly been happening. I last year moved to a new parish, so I'm now at St. Joe's in Mechanicsburg, a big parish with it's the deaf community for the diocese, so that's exciting. So having to learn another language, it's great. The community's wonderful, so I'm looking forward to that. Other than that, I left the military back in 2021, just after COVID, just because there was so much going on and I had so many responsibilities, something had to give. And so I said, look, the thing that needs to give is the military. I need to devote myself to my priestly work in the civilian world. So was separated. But it was not too long after, a couple of years after that, I ran into our JAG officer, who's the attorney, the lawyer in the military, in the airport. We were both going somewhere, and I ran into him, and I went up to him. I said, "Oh, sir, how you doing? It's so good to see you." A little chit-chat. And then before he got boarded his plane, I said, "Let me just tell you one thing. I miss putting on the uniform. I just miss it." So he parted his ways. I went where I was going. And then a couple months later, I got a phone call from the 2-star general who I knew when he was a lieutenant colonel, Catholic. And he said to me, "Hey, I hear you want to come back." I said, "Not exactly my words, sir, but I'd entertain a conversation." So we met and we talked, and it seemed agreeable to me what he was proposing. I said, "Well, we got to get by the guy with the hat." So we had to write to Bishop. And Bishop, too, was very generous and said he understood the need and understood what I'd be doing. So he gave his approval. So I've been in process now to go through all the paperwork and everything that needs to happen to recommission. So the plan is that I would be working at state headquarters up in Annville as the Air National Guard chaplain for the state of Pennsylvania, the supervisory chaplain. So that'll be great.
Now, are there a lot of chaplains up there, or is it just you?
At headquarters, it would be just me.
My goodness.
Yeah. And so I would be looking at all the Air National Guard chaplains throughout the state. But the thing that's most interesting is I would be the only Catholic priest in the Pennsylvania Air National Guard.
Wow.
So it provides a ministerial opportunity that when I do go visit other wings to just be present and provide the sacraments and things that they might need when I'm there doing a visit. So I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah. That's I love that this process, while it's a lot of bureaucracy and hurry up and wait, that you don't have to go through boot camp again, because that would be miserable.
True. But I have had to worry about getting back into my uniforms and taking off some extra weight. So I've been working on that. But other than that, it's all good.
Now, just to clear the air, would you have to worry about possibly deploying
always
in the future?
Anybody, always. And I would not mind that a bit. I think the bishop would not be thrilled, but they're aware that it's a possibility. He said that to me. But it was a great opportunity, hard as all get out, but it was a great ministerial opportunity. And I loved almost every minute of it. But just to be present in such an environment and be able to be that minister to so many people, it was really great.
Now, I know this is something that you get to now look forward to again, but when you were active in the military, what did your day-to-day look like? And what did being that witness to Christ in a military environment look like for you? As
a guard chaplain, it's certainly different than a full-time chaplain in the military. So it was only that weekend warrior kind of deal. But nonetheless, When we were on base, it was always about establishing those relationships, just being present, just going into their shop and just being present and hanging out a little bit so that when something goes awry, they know someone cares and they can have that relationship built to come and talk instead of having to go cold turkey to someone they don't really know. So that's really developing those relationships. And then once those relationships are established, it's whatever counseling might come along. Sometimes it's marriage issues or personal issues that they're going through. Any number of times I dealt with grief issues that someone had lost a friend or a parent or a loved one, and they needed just to talk things through. Things dealing with their military service, the things they have to do, things that they're questioning, questions about God. So just to be there and to be that presence for them and someone to talk to. And the good thing is that total confidentiality that we have. And in the military, chaplains are the only ones that have that.
Really?
If they speak to the chaplain, it is 100% confidential.
Oh, wow.
I will never, it's almost like confession. I will never tell anybody, what they talked about. And so that really gives people a lot of comfort. I think too of my experience at Landstuhl, it was just I was deployed for a short time, about 6 weeks at Landstuhl Hospital. And it's an Army hospital, and the protocol there is fascinating, at least when I was there. I'm sure it hasn't changed. But when a ambulance would pull up, bringing people in from downrange who had been injured and were coming in, no matter what time of day or night that ambulance arrived at Landstuhl Hospital, the chaplain was there, whoever was on duty. And when they pulled the stretcher off the ambulance and put it on the ground, everybody stepped back, and the chaplain stepped up and said, "I'm Chaplain so-and-so. You are in Germany. You are safe. We are going to take absolutely the best care of you, whatever you need, psychologically, physically, emotionally, medically, we will provide it for you." And we knew from the manifest different religions, so then we always added, "Can I pray with you?" No one ever said no. You pray according to their traditions, so you're not offensive, but that's the protocol. And so the military recognizes the role that spirituality plays in healing. So that's so important. The other aspect would be, we were often told in chaplain school, we wear the same uniform as everybody else, but we're the visible reminder of the holy. And that comes not because of any little insignia that we wear, but just how we live. And so that's the way that you are just present to everybody and you be that witness for God in the midst of a military environment.
Yeah, that's got to be so important to have, especially because when people are putting themselves in situations like that, it really calls into question like your morality and everything you know about the world. And to have somebody there who's that steadfast presence has got to be enormously comforting. Yeah,
it's really very important for them. And there are those opportunities. You need grounding. You need some clarity when it comes to what you need to do and the things you're called to do in the military. So it's a great opportunity for us as chaplains to be there present.
Yeah. So I know for a lot of people listening to this, maybe watching the news, I know personally it's hard for me to watch the news because I've talked about this on the show before, but I am a military spouse, and sometimes just hearing even just the phrase boots on the ground like carries an entirely different meaning when you have skin in the game.
Yeah.
So as a Catholic church, we do have teachings on war and battles and all the things that have happened throughout centuries. So how does the Catholic Church define a just war? Like, what are the core criteria according to Catholic teaching?
Right. And that's really important for us to know. The Catechism makes it really clear, 2309, if you want to look it up. But it says that there are 4 criteria for just war that have to be met, all of them, or it's not a just war. So just going through them, the first is it has to be a just cause. The damage that's inflicted by the aggressor has to be lasting and grave and certain. So it's not a question about something that might happen, but it's a certain damage that's been inflicted. Secondly, it has to be a last resort. Every other peaceful means of resolving it has to have been exhausted. Thirdly, the prospect of success so that we avoid futile violence. There has to be a prospect this will be successful and come to an end. And then proportionality. The use of arms must not create evils and disorder graver, more serious than the evil that is to be eliminated. This has to weigh really heavily in any application of just war theory. When I look at this, I just think of the damage and the impact to life of modern warfare, because modern warfare can be catastrophic. In past centuries, you mentioned past centuries, we were talking about swords on the battlefields of Europe, soldiers in armor. And then later, perhaps like guns and cannons in Gettysburg. Now we're talking about bombs that get dropped from 30,000 feet. That's a whole different aspect of what the damage that's being caused. Now, personally, and as a former member of the military, I really believe that we as a nation are very careful about our targeting. Nonetheless, nothing's perfect and mistakes happen. So all of those things really need to come together when we talk about, is this war a just war or not? And then there's other aspects that we have to consider. Legitimate authority. Is the war declared by those in charge of the common good, not just some private person? Are there the right intentions? Is the goal to advance good or avoid evil, and not just vengeance and territorial gains? Those are all aspects that I think need to be considered when we talk about a just war theory.
So then why, given everything else that the Catholic Church teaches, why do we include teachings like this? Like, what's the bigger moral vision behind it? And especially in educating those who are not the boots on the ground.
Yeah. It's, I think, two major things. It's a respect for life and that call that Jesus had to be peacemakers. Blessed are the peacemakers. We hear that over and over. But that's the reality. And isn't this what our Holy Father's preaching? Peace. Just war theory really is rooted in St. Augustine and then St. Thomas Aquinas. Augustine, who died in the year 430, approved of a limited violence to defend the innocent. But he and the whole church emphasizes the great suffering that is war. No matter what, it's going to bring suffering. Thomas Aquinas, later in the 13th century, he took up Augustine's theory of just war to explain how the church can reconcile Christ's command of peace with a state's duty to protect its citizens. So St. Thomas quoted Augustine, "War is waged in order that peace may be obtained. Therefore, even in waging war, cherish the spirit of a peacemaker, that by conquering those whom you attack, you may lead them back to the advantages of peace." That has to be at the root of everything, as St. Thomas and St. Augustine said. It has to be about bringing about peace through a temporary time of conflict. Both St. Augustine and St. Thomas see peace and not the devastation of the enemy as the only correct intention or end for war. Those who wage war justly aim at peace, St. Thomas said. And even coming forward, John Paul II, he was against war very much. He was talking to the diplomatic corps back in 2003, and he said, "No to war. War is never inevitable. It is always a defeat for humankind." Just that reality of what it is. And Pope Leo, just on April 13th, on his way to Algiers for a papal visit, he reminded everyone that he's not a politician. In quoting him, "We're not looking to make foreign policy, but I believe in the message of the gospel. Blessed are the peacemakers. That is the message the world needs to hear today." And so he said, "I'm going to continue speaking out loudly against war, looking to promote peace, promoting dialogue, multilateral relationships among states to look for just solutions to problems. Too many people are suffering in the world today. Too many innocent people are being killed. And I think someone has to stand up and say there's a better way." So that's why this is also important and why the church needs to have a voice, which is sometimes in opposition to political leaders, but we need to be that voice for Christ, and the Pope is, in particular, is vicar for Christ, saying, hey, look, peace always has to be the objective. Sometimes it's necessary for a time of conflict, but this has to be all about bringing about peace and respect for the dignity of life.
So that must create a lot of conflict, I would imagine, especially for the soldiers who are charged with I know I'm probably going to get it wrong, and I definitely don't remember who said it, but ours is not to question why, ours is but to do and die, right? So soldiers have to follow orders, but when in the back of our heads, if we are Christian and practicing this idea of peace is necessary, that must bring some real questions of morality and not just physical injury, but spiritual and moral injury as well. So when they come to you with that, how do you help them wrestle with this conflict that they must be feeling?
Yeah, and you're exactly right. One of the things we deal with often is that moral injury and how we help them. When Archbishop Broglio addressed this recently, he did an interview with CBS Face the Nation. And just for context, remember Archbishop Broglio is the Archbishop for Military Services USA. And so he oversees more than 200 priests serving as chaplains across global deployments who minister not in parishes, but on bases, in conflict zones, and increasingly fragmented communities. So he spoke about how this conflict has meant that families of service members, who are, of course, their support, right? The families have been relocated to Europe or even back to the USA. In fact, I have some people in my parish, they came up a couple weeks ago and said, hey, we're from Dubai and we got moved here because of the situation that's going on. So this leaves those military members without the family support. And it leaves the chaplains who must work in a pastoral landscape that's now defined by absence, by displacement, and by a lot of uncertainty. And so this is the context in which now our chaplains are working. I recall well, during my deployment in 2020, I was in the United Arab Emirates in Abu Dhabi. And that base there is among the closest bases to the Strait of Hormuz. There was regular tension with Iran, as there always has been, even back then. And I remember counseling a number of airmen and soldiers about what they were doing, about their jobs in the military, how they could reconcile what they were trained to do with their conscience. It's difficult, and it can take a toll on one's moral compass unless I think those principles of just war theory we discussed are kept in mind, that ultimately what we do is for peace and not for destruction. Archbishop Broglio spoke well about that in the interview. He said, we do not question their duty, the military members, but remind them that they must minimize harm, preserve innocent life, and remain attentive to conscience. It's something that acknowledges the ethical burden carried by members of the military who have to navigate the distance between orders and moral convictions. And this is where we chaplains come in, to help them navigate between those two sides. And it can be tough, and it's not going to be a one-time counseling most of the time, a one-time meeting, but to really just help them walk through that and talk things through and come to a place where in their conscience, they're okay with following the orders that they've been given.
Talk about an impossible job.
Pretty much.
Heavy burden that is placed on chaplains in this time, because then you guys are also you're also in harm's way. You're also being asked to do something incredibly taxing and just physically demanding. That's, oof.
Yeah, it can be tough. And there comes sometimes that there is this dissociation between what's happening there and what I'm doing here, which is my job. Because when you do something when you're looking at somebody eye to eye, you know who they are. But when you're 30,000 feet or even further away and you're doing what you're called to do by orders or by responsibility, that can be really hard. How do you wrestle with that and what I'm doing? But then I go home and have dinner with my wife and kids. That can be really hard.
My husband described it because he was at a command post when he was deployed, and he said, it almost, the way war is fought now, you're not facing somebody face to face on a battlefield. You're not in trench warfare. You're not. He's like, I rarely saw anybody. Correct. It was on a screen. So you almost forget that there's people, there are real lives down there that are being affected by this. He said it almost felt like a video game, and we're so desensitized by video games anymore that this feels normal. So that's.
I'm glad you said what I was thinking, because there's some things I'm careful not to say, but I'm glad you said it, because you can, I can't.
Yeah, it's so tricky anymore. It just, because again, like you said, you're not actually facing somebody, but inside you're still wrestling with all that.
Absolutely, because if you have any, awareness of your own conscience, you know that what's on that screen is not a video game where the guy's going to get up again and be recharged in 20 minutes.
We have to tell my kids that all the time. We're like, in real life, you don't respawn. You don't come back. That's.
Yeah. So that's really a tough challenge for people to emotionally and in conscience deal with.
Bringing it back home, we talked about peace, and the end goal of war should always be peace. How can we as Catholics grow in peace if we're not in a physical war? We might be in a daily battle for whatever we're all going through. We're all fighting battles that probably nobody knows anything about. But how can we grow in being people of peace in our daily lives?
Yeah. We have to remember peace is not an absence of war or conflict, right? But peace is the ordering of our human nature according to the eternal law of God. So it's a matter of the heart, I think. Peace is a matter of the heart. And this is where peace begins within. And I think in little ways. So, think about, how do you drive? Is it peaceful or aggressive?
Depends on the day.
Oh, no, that's not the right answer. It should always be peaceful, right? But I lived in Rome for a number of years. And I think the driving here is worse than Center City, Rome.
Really?
People are so aggressive and so fast. It's not at all peaceful. Just think about, that's a simple thing. How do I drive? Do I drive in a way that promotes peace or a way that causes aggravation? Think about how you interact with people at the store, with calm and with joy or with impatience. And somebody called me out on this one day. I was at the car wash and something wasn't working right. And I was getting frustrated. And the guy came up and said, "Sir, it's Christmas Eve. Relax." It's like, you are so right, But just how do we interact with people? Are we calm and joyful in how we interact? Think about how we talk to someone who disagrees with epitaphs, they're this or that, or with an open heart to hear and perhaps ready to present the truth with love. I think if we all slowed down, if we shut off the talking heads yelling at one another on every cable news network, if we listened, if we put others first, if we keep God at the center of our lives, that's how peace starts to grow. And I think that's where it starts and that's where it ends. Peace isn't the absence of conflict, but a right relationship with God as individuals, as a community, and as a world. I think it starts with us. Little things every day.
Yeah, I love that. It's not the absence of conflict, and it starts from within. Be the peace you want to see in the world.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
I love that. Well, Father Bateman, thank you so much for your time, and thank you so much for your service.
Oh, absolutely.
And that's our show. Candid Catholic Convos is brought to you by the Diocese of Harrisburg, hosted and sound engineered by me, Rachel Trochet, and produced by Rachel Bryson. If today's episode resonated with you, please share it on social media. You can tag us using @HBGDiocese. Make sure you also subscribe on your preferred listening platform so you never miss an episode. And if you'd like to support our production efforts, a donation to our diocesan annual campaign would benefit us greatly in continuing our ministry. We have lots of exciting episodes planned for the next several weeks, so subscribe, keep praying for us, and we'll keep praying for you.